I should just... Oh, good, it works. Excellent. I'm just into... we're not starting just yet, but I wanted to let you know that this meeting is being streamed live on Facebook. So for the benefit of the Facebook audience, I'm saying hello, we'll start soon. As I said to some of you earlier, people are just parking and looking at a little bit of the information. We'll get started in a few minutes, but for the benefit of the Facebook people, you're at the right meeting. We'll get started soon. Thank you. can you put up your hand if you've got a spare chair next to you? Oh, there's one, there's 2, 3, 4. Oh, have you got a spare chair next to you? Excellent. We've got about 4 chairs. Keep your hands up, and people down the back, if you want to make your way towards that hand, there's a spare chair there. We also have a spillover room where people can watch proceedings on a screen, but there are spare chairs if you want to sit down here. Apparently we have 250 people watching on Facebook already and growing, so that's great. Oh, one more spare chair, still a spare chair, still 2 spare chairs, 3 spare chairs, 4. It's like an auction. There's 4 spare chairs up here if anyone wants to sit down. Follow the hands. See that hand there? There you go. There's a chair over there. 2, 3. And there's one right at the front. Yep, there's one over there. And there's one here too. There's a spare chair up here. Spare chair up the front here. There you go. And one over here at the front as well. And this man has had his hand up for about 10 minutes. There's another chair there. Thank you. Great. So we can go. Okay, so this is such a popular event. People are still coming in, but we're going to start. So welcome. My name is Jacinta. I'm an independent facilitator helping the council out tonight with this community meeting about North East Link and the corridor options. Thank you so much for coming. Just before we get started, if you weren't here tonight, what might you be doing? Have a chat to your neighbour really quickly. If you weren't here tonight, what might you be doing? Excellent. So your vocal cords are all working. That's terrific. So just to make sure that you're all at the right meeting, the purpose of our meeting tonight, this is a meeting hosted by Nillumbik Shire, and it's to inform you about the 4 corridor options that are being proposed for North East Link, and to inform you about the council's preferred option, and to answer your questions. And we have till about 9 o'clock tonight. So in the available time, we'll do our best to provide that information and have space and time for your questions. But as you walked in, you would have noticed there's lots of paper stuck up on the wall and sticky dots and sticky notes and pens. There's also paper on your chairs and there's pens on the floor if you don't have one in your bag at the start of the row. So there's lots of opportunities to write your questions down if you don't get to ask it tonight. And I should highlight that this is the first of many, many conversations that the council are hosting, and North East Link are hosting many community engagement sessions over the next few weeks as well. So is everybody at the right meeting? Excellent. Okay. Another thing I'd like to say is that because we have till 9 o'clock, so in that available time, just a note about how we're going to work together. And I guess the key word is respect. Respect for time. I know we started late, so we're already a bit behind the 8 ball on that one, but that's because it was so popular. But respect for time, so I'm going to make sure that you get out of here on time to get on with whatever it is you would normally be doing. And also respect for each other. We have some people providing you information tonight, and there will be opportunities for you to ask questions, but the format for tonight, if you can see it over there on the stage, and I've got it down at the back wall over there, we're in the middle of the welcome, and then there'll be some information from North East Link and from the council, some questions in between, but at 8:25 or thereabouts, we'll have a good 20 minutes or so for a Q&A session between you guys and some of our experts on the stage. So we'll have the questions towards the end of the session. So now I'd like to ask the Mayor, Peter Clark, to do the acknowledgement to country and also recognise our VIPs in the room. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Jacinta. Nillumbik Shire Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri as the traditional custodians of the land now known as Nillumbik and values the significance of the Wurundjeri people's history as essential to the unique character of our Shire. It's indeed a pleasure to welcome you all this evening in what is the first, I suspect, a series of public forums and meetings about this very important North East Link. Can I first just recognise my fellow councillors in the room, and they might stand there perhaps as I read them out. Deputy Mayor Councillor Karen Egan, Councillor Grant Brooker, Councillor John Dumerick, Councillor Jane Ashton and Councillor Bruce Rankin. We have an apology from Councillor Peter Perkins, who has a shift working type job, which means he is employed tonight. We also have, we've invited virtually all of our politicians, local, upper house, local members. I'm not sure, but I can say that I have the Honourable Mary Wooldridge, who's Coalition Upper House Leader and member for Eastern Metropolitan. I'm not aware of, I've asked officers to let me know, I'm not aware of any of the other members of Parliament who are present, although I'm sure, as you're aware now, you'll have on your seats a contact sheet both for ourselves as councillors to be able to get access to after tonight, and also all of the members of Parliament from all of the political parties that are representing our area. The main purpose of that is to assist you in enabling you to contact them and to make your points clear as well known, as well as obviously to be able to talk to us as your local council. I could also just recognise those over 200 plus now members on Facebook. This is the first live streaming we've done for a Facebook public meeting as those that are present tonight. So we thank you very much for your attendance. This is clearly an important issue to us all, and I'll be back a little later on after we've heard from North East Link to tell you about where Council's up to and its considerations. Thank you.
Yeah. So without any further ado, the thing you've all been waiting for, I think, is information from North East Link. And I'd like to invite Kim Jordan from the North East Link Authority to share the information with you, and I'll just get her presentation lined up. She's got some great facts and figures for you all. Now, as you're listening, please feel free to use the bits of paper that you've got there and the pens to write down questions as they come to you. All right.
Hi everyone, and thank you for having me here. And we have Bruno Alexic also from North East Link Authority over there, because one person isn't the holder of all the information that you'll probably need to know. Fantastic to see such a great group of people here. And I was just saying to the Mayor that the projects that don't go so well are the ones where people don't come out early in the piece and we don't know until very late how things are going. So thank you, and thank you to all the people who are watching at home. So first of all, just a bit about the North East Link Authority, which many of you may not have heard about until a few days ago. The North East Link Authority was set up last year, and we're responsible for all aspects of developing the North East Link. So that starts with developing a business case, which is what we're doing at the moment. We also then need to get down to the business of actually designing the road and all the aspects of that, to put it through its environmental approvals, which is a phase which will take up at least most of next year, and then ultimately to go into the procurement of it, and of course the stakeholder and community engagement that goes along with that. So why we're here today, and I haven't got very long because actually I'd rather hear from you than rabbit on, is to just talk for a moment about why a North East Link at this point, to give you a quick snapshot of the traffic. A lot of the information the Council have very kindly put out in the foyer, and you will hopefully mostly have seen it in the newsletter so far as well. Talk about the consultation we've done, a look at the 4 corridors that we've been looking at the moment, to talk with you about how we've been assessing the corridors, and that's probably the part that's most interesting for you, is if you've seen the newsletter, where did those ticks and crosses come from? And then just quickly at the end to talk a bit about the next 12 or 18 months. So there's a lot of people here I can see who probably remember North East Link being talked about for a very long time, and in fact when we started doing our work it was first mooted in 1929, and then it probably went a bit quiet till 1969, and then most of you will be more aware of the studies that have been done in 2008 and 2011. The issue that came up most recently is just the way the growth of Melbourne is going, and you can see on that slide there, that comes from the Victorian Planning Authority, and it shows you where the urban growth boundary is. The dark grey corridors are the sections where it's been slated that the growth in Melbourne should be. So you can see those areas are to the north and to the southeast there. Now, the urban growth boundary has been there since 2002, and most recently in the 2017 version of Plan Melbourne, which is Melbourne's strategic planning document, it's in place until 2050. So I want to make it very clear that in all the planning that we've done, we assume that the urban growth boundary stays where it is. So we'll talk about that a bit later. The northern corridor we can see on there is the fastest growing in the demographics and the planning that's been done. We are anticipating, and the planning that we're doing is assuming an extra 330,000 people up there, and up to about 100,000 more jobs as well. So you can understand the pressure that that puts on the transport system overall. We're part of an authority that's here to build a road, but that's not able to be done in isolation anymore. So when we build a road, it has to be something that also fits in with the overarching transport program. So I won't talk about that here. In the technical summary that you've got, or that you can see online, you'll see that there's an example explaining some of the other public transport and other road projects which are going on as well. So we got told, and you all got told by the Premier, that there's a missing link and that we're going to fill it, and that's good, and that's what we need to do. But the Department of Treasury and Finance has a bit more to say than just that. So in order to do that work, we had to go right back to the start and say, what is it that we actually are trying to achieve by putting in the missing link? And if we can achieve those things, what are the benefits that we get out of it? So one of the main things that I think a lot of you recognise here is that there's a poor orbital connectivity, particularly between the north and the southeast. So we need to fix that in a statewide sense to develop the economic potential for Victoria. A really important part of this is moving freight more efficiently, and that's freight from the southeast to the northeast and freight around the northeast. And so that becomes a big part of what also makes businesses competitive. And the third one there, of course, is about what's actually happening for the people who are in the northeast and the connections that you need to make. And even in the 7,000 odd responses we got to our community survey, I was just staggered at how many people who are living out here are spending 3 hours a day or more travelling to work or travelling to their place of study. And while some of those people have made that choice to live in places that are further out, a lot of them are telling us that they're spending a lot more time travelling than they wanted to do. So the benefits that we get out of that are economic growth. And apologies for looking at the slide, but actually it's a little bit dark on the stand here, so I can't see my notes very well. We need to improve the competitiveness of the state overall. So whilst I appreciate that this is very important for you here, and it's fantastic that you're here to make sure the project works for you, it is actually important for the state of Victoria overall. We need to also increase economic opportunities for people who are living here and people who are working in this region as well. And we want to, in the process of doing that, improve the livability and the safety for the people who are living in the northeast. And I know that some of you, particularly in Nillumbik, are concerned about fire and emergency procedures, and we'll talk about that later on. So it's become very clear to us in many respects what it is that's important to people here. So those problems and those benefits need to translate into objectives and principles, and I won't go into them here because, again, they're available online. The Council's got them up out in the foyer. But primarily the objectives are, what do we need North East Link to do? And the principles are, how will we achieve it? And we separated those out so that we can achieve all of the objectives but still have the responsibility to abide by the principles. So the principles are, effectively, how do we minimise impacts on people, or how do we provide better opportunities? So I just want to talk a little bit about the traffic, and these maps here are what the transport modellers and planners call origin destination data. So the green spots are the origins, that's where travellers start from, and the blue spots are where they're going to. And what you're really seeing here on these two slides are the river crossings. So what the North East Link really needs to do in short words is get people across the Yarra River. And at the moment, as you're all too aware, there's kind of 4 spots where that happens. So it just is showing you, I guess, that the traffic that's on those north-south routes at the moment is going north and south. You can see that it's a sprinkled amount of them who are actually going east or west on that route. So the link that we're providing is a north-east link in that respect. The second one of those is just showing you the ones more local to you. So the Kangaroo Ground Warrandyte one on the right and Fitzsimmons Lane. So you can see fairly quickly there's a bit of a different dispersion depending on it, and see that the further east we go, the people who are using the bridge are behaving slightly differently. Again, those diagrams are in the books, and if you come to the North East Link session that we're having in this very same room tomorrow night, we'll have some of our transport people here and a lot more of that information available for you to go through if you'd like to understand more about that. The data, primarily the origin destination data, comes from traffic surveys that we've done. So this is real data, this isn't modelled data. This has come from Bluetooth surveys conducted by VicRoads, and as Bruno was just describing earlier, we used to do this stuff in a very laborious way with people out with clickers and following cars. So now we've got the Bluetooth data, de-identified, I hasten to assure you, that tells us where people are coming from and going to, so it has taken the guesswork out in that way. So in the process of coming up with the 4 options that we're going to look at tonight, who have we talked to? Well, as I said, the community survey, we had over 7,000 people respond to that. In other major projects that I've worked on, we've had 1,500 or 2,000 people. So the 7,000 is an absolutely good recognition of the fact that people out here are engaged and want to tell us about it. But equally within that survey, we got quite a good percentage, around 35% I think it was, of people who are users of the current road system. And equally we got a percentage of truck drivers and commercial drivers that also sits about with the percentage of people who are using it. So we've had ongoing discussions since early this year with local governments. So obviously the main ones in the project area have taken a lot of our time, and we've listened to a lot that they have to say, but overall we've talked to 13 different local government areas talking about what their needs and requirements are. We've talked to a lot of Victorian state government authorities, and really I couldn't possibly name them all, but the primary ones, of course, the transport ones. So Transport for Victoria, which is the overarching body now for the transport authorities like VicRoads and Public Transport Victoria and so forth. There's a piece of legislation, the Transport Integration Act, that says you can't just build a road, you actually have to look at what that means for land use, what it means for social inclusion and what it means for communities. And that's just not about roads, it's about transport. So if the Port of Melbourne wants to make a change, they need to abide by this Act as well to get to make sure that things are working properly. We've also talked to emergency services. We've talked, of course, to Treasury and Finance, to the Premiers. People in our department have spent quite a bit of time with local members of Parliament and with the councillors as well as council staff. We've also spoken to the federal government, to the Department of Defence, because the Corridor A includes the Watsonia Simpson Barracks and that federally owned land there. And of course the Federal Department of Environment has a say in what we do in terms of environmental approvals as well. We've talked to industry, we've talked to the freight industry, we've talked to peak bodies about the sorts of businesses that are in the project area. We've talked to the construction industry as well, because the days have gone when an engineer could design a road and when someone came to build it, it wasn't really possible or it didn't really work. So we don't do that anymore, and in fact we've had quite a few construction industry people already coming to some of our information sessions, and again part of their job is to listen to what people like you are saying and understand what the things are that are of interest to you. We've had a lot of discussions as well on social media for those who use it, a lot of information coming through Facebook and through Twitter. We've had a few hundred emails from people who've got very specific interests that they want to discuss. We've had quite a lot of meetings with community groups, and I can see people in the room here that we've met with a couple of times. A lot of what we've been doing is responding to what people want and when they'd like to talk to us. So rather than saying, as we're doing in this next fortnight, we'll be here at this time, come here. If there's groups of people who want to talk to us, then we've been doing that as well. So, that was the one I was going for. There's always a little moment with the technology, isn't there? These are the 4 alignments together, and I just want to reiterate on this map that these do just have the lines. It doesn't show you any construction technique on here, so it's just the 4 options that you can see together. And the things that came up out of all 4 alignments that we needed to look at in terms of planning and engineering is there is no existing road reserve, so a few of you will be familiar that there are still some public acquisition overlays for road reserves in various places. There's one still on Reynolds Road, not your Reynolds Road, the Reynolds Road in Donvale, on, for example, the Healesville Freeway Reserve, which is the lower part of the Corridor D. There's challenging terrain on each of these. So there's, again, if you look in the online material, there's some elevation profiles of each of the different options, which are particularly challenging for engineers in terms of providing for freight, because we really need to make sure that the grades are pretty even as much as possible for it to be worthwhile for the freight industry to get the travel changes that they need. Each of the alignments has Yarra River crossings, which we need to make sure we do sensitively. And I should have mentioned in our multifarious groups of authorities that Melbourne Water and Parks Victoria, of course, are well up the list on that as well. There's a lot of environmentally sensitive areas. Each one of them, although we seek to minimise acquisition of private property, each one of them is likely to have some acquisition of private property, no matter how minimal we can make it. All of them have a need for upgrades or work on to make the connections at new interchanges with the existing road network. And all of them actually have utilities easements, so whether it's the power lines that you're mostly familiar with, but there's also gas and water facilities as well. I think I don't need to spend too long on these. I think you've been looking at them now. The western option is the one that effectively runs down beside in the road reserve for the Greensborough Highway. So I do want to make it clear, because some of the feedback we've had, we're not using existing roads for the North East Link. These will be new roads. So we're not turning the Greensborough Highway and Bulleen Road into the North East Link. This would be a different road altogether, connecting the M80 down to the Eastern Freeway. This option also requires a significant amount of work on the Eastern Freeway. So one of the things that we have to do is make sure we don't solve one problem by creating another one. So if there's going to be more traffic on the Eastern Freeway between the Eastlink tunnels and Bulleen Road, we need to make sure that they're not disadvantaged by that in what we do. So this one here, it's around 11 kilometres. About 50% of it is the minimum we can see would need to be tunnels. So at the moment, what you see on the map shows us between Lower Plenty Road and Banksia Street. So the whole of the Banyule Flats would have tunnel well beneath it, and underneath the Heide Museum, of course, as well. We're also really mindful of the environmental issues on the Yarra just to the west of Bulleen Road as well, in that area there. Now getting to the ones that you're probably a bit more interested in here. Corridor B, going from the M80 again to Grimshaw Street. It's around 24 kilometres. On this route, around 70% of it likely to be in tunnels. That's the minimum that we've got so far. You'll see for each of these routes that there's a significant amount that looks like it follows the power reserve, and the initial thinking that came from a lot of people actually, and which we need to do, is look at public land. But we have understood from early meetings with AusNet that particularly the bigger the 500 kilovolt power lines can't go underground in the easement that's there. They would actually need a bigger easement underground. And in none of them can we fit a new freeway and the power lines. So one or the other would need to go underground in those sections there. This one makes some good connections as well, as I said, from the M80 to Eastlink now, but it does require significant works in the Eastlink corridor to make that connection. It also requires an upgrade to Springvale Road to cater for the extra traffic that would be coming on to the North East Link from there. And it includes the long-mooted extension of Reynolds Road to the Maroondah Highway. And the Corridor C, which is the other one that I think you're most keen to know about, a little bit longer, slightly more orbital. You can see it goes a bit further to the north there. Around 26 kilometres for this one. The minimum in tunnel for this one at the moment is about 55%. The interchanges on this one, I'm not sure if it was so clear on the other. Diamond Creek Road, Ryans Road, Reynolds Road and Canterbury Road, south of the East Link tunnels, are the ones that we've been looking at the moment. So I'd like to say for all of these that the way we needed to get a line on the map was to be able to have a line that allowed the transport modelling to happen. So the line that's on the map allows for the possibility that we would had entirely a surface road. We're telling you now that a big percentage of each of these routes would in fact be tunnel, and so therefore the line that we've got here at the moment isn't necessarily the exact line that we'd end up with, and it's one of the reasons the line is still quite vague. So I appreciate, and a lot of people have told me and told our team, we want to see more closely how it affects our property, but we're really not at that stage yet. So I'll talk about that a bit more later. And the final one that we've got is the one that is the furthest out. This is the one, I guess, that for many people intuitively looks like the ring road. And it goes further out. Arrived originally, I guess, in the planning scheme because there was an idea that this one could be built entirely on the surface, and so it would allow for placarded and oversized roads. But in fact, it's been established once we do the environmental work that about 40% of this route would also need to be in tunnels to protect sensitive areas, and it's about 40 kilometres altogether. It doesn't provide nearly the same connections that the ones further to the west do, and it still requires that significant work at the East Link interchanges. It does use a bit of the Healesville Freeway Reserve to the south, as I said earlier. So, when we look at each of these, what is it that we need to do? So I talked to you before about the project objectives and the principles that we set up beforehand. Equally, before we established these corridors, we said what was it that we need each of these to do. They've each been assessed independently of each other for how they measure up against them. So when you look in the newsletter and in the boards outside at the ticks and crosses, what it's showing you is how each of those corridors measured up against the criteria that we were using. So to just go briefly on this, what we really looked at was how does each corridor provide opportunities to reduce traffic on the local roads in the northeast? How does it attract trucks so that they don't need to use the existing roads? How do we provide better access for people and quicker access for people to get to jobs? How do we provide businesses with faster connections and access to more workers? How do we improve the efficiency of freight movement so that our industries can remain competitive? How do we provide opportunities to, or how do they provide opportunities to improve public transport services, and importantly to improve walking and cycling services as well? So I think it's dear to the heart of a lot of councils, but also though you may not believe it to road authorities, that our roads will last longer if we have more people not using them. So road authorities also want people on public transport and using active transport. And we also want to make sure that we understand how each of these options can reduce impacts on sensitive areas. I'm just going to go really, really quickly through what these impacts are now, because I'm mindful that we want to have some questions. But this is just a quick look at what the traffic modelling does for us in the end. So this is looking at potential traffic numbers in 2031. And if you look through, again online or in the technical summaries, I'm not sure if you've got it outside, it just tells you the change in numbers on each of those roads, which are in our area here. So you can see the one at the top there that has the increases. That's Grimshaw Street to the west of... which road, Bruno? Thank you. So... yeah. As far as moving freight more efficiently is concerned, and I emphasise that these estimates are early estimates, but they are for freight, they're not for commuters. So these are freight vehicles going from the M80 and coming up from the southeast there. So you can see each of them provide what are pretty significant savings for freight traffic, which has got thousands and thousands of movements a year. So it might not look so much for one car trip, but it is actually pretty significant on all of them for freight. But the biggest one is on the most western of those. What freight is doing or tending to do at the moment is to go on the Monash and then via CityLink if it's going to the north, because we haven't really got the better options, or using primarily Rosanna Road, which for those of you who are unfortunate enough to have to use it has a peak period from about 5 a.m. till 7 p.m. That road is at capacity. As far as environmental things are concerned, there's a lot of work being done, but the main thing I guess I want to say to you is that the tunnelling is predominantly there to protect the environmentally sensitive areas that we've already identified. And what we want to hear from you is, have we got enough tunnels? We've heard from a few people we've got too many tunnels, but overarchingly that's not what we hear. The areas shown on the corridors are the minimum of those. So in considering that, what really has allowed for it is the heritage and landscape sensitivity, open space and the community values that you have. Out of the community survey and what we hear from people, we know that the environment's important to you in a bunch of different ways. It's important in terms of what we traditionally think, I suppose, is flora and fauna, but we're hearing from a lot of people that it's actually living in that environment that's really important to you. And we also know that it's important that the urban growth boundary and what that represents is important to you as well. So, as I said before, that's one of the primary things that we're planning around, and our economic modelling predominantly also has to look at any pressures that we would be putting on the urban growth boundary with the change in usage and the accessibility to different types of land. So now really we're just at the next 12 to 18 months. I'm not going to read through all of those, but it's just saying to you, you can look at it whilst I finish off. That's the start of the environmental studies that we are planning to do. In the next 12 or 18 months, we're hoping that we're planning that by the end of this year, we have a preferred corridor to come back to you with. So we appreciate that this is a period of uncertainty for people not knowing which way we're going. And the cleft stick we're in is, if we came out with a preferred corridor, then people would be saying, well, why didn't you talk to us before you made this decision? Involving you in the decision-making process means there's a period of anxiety and uncertainty for some people. And I apologise to that, and I ask you to call us if it's really bothering you, but we think that the process is better when we've invited for you to have some input into what we're saying now. So the preferred route by the end of this year, the business case that we're working on now would be substantially finished by then in order for Cabinet to make the decision to agree on a preferred option. We'd expect the business case then to be released early next year. And starting from September this year, we'll be starting to do particularly the flora and fauna studies that we need to do for an environment effects statement, because that is 12 months worth of work. So taking us September to get a full year worth of conditions there. I'm happy to discuss, and I'm sure plenty of people here are, how the environment effects statement works, but just to say, there's an independent panel at the end of that, and you have a chance throughout the time that we're pulling that together to tell us what you think, but more importantly at the end to tell the independent panel what you think. In terms of where we go next, as I've been saying a lot of time, there's a lot of information on our website. The beauty of that is that you get to look at it in your own time, to talk to your friends about it, to say what you think about it. There's an online forum that's open. That's a forum really for you to talk to each other. So we're occasionally providing some answers and some technical input, but primarily it's for people to talk with each other. There's a survey there, and what we're asking you to do is to answer some questions that go back to those objectives and principles, because to help us work out how we get to the preferred corridor, we need to use the same evaluation process with your information as we do for our own. We've got the drop-in information session, so the one here tomorrow night, but we've done 2 already, so there's another series going through until the 24th of August throughout this area. But this is just the very first step. And from October, we'll be starting some small group forums, but we really want to hear from you over the next few weeks what the things are that you're most interested in and that you'd like more information about. And the very last one is just really what are we asking from you? We're asking you to have a look at the work that we've done, to challenge it, to tell us if we've got it right, to tell us if there's anything else that we need to be looking at, to tell us what more evidence you need from us if you don't think that we've covered the things that we should, or if you don't believe what we've said so far. At the end of it, I appreciate that there's not going to be everybody pleased with whatever the decision is that's made, and that's the nature of big government projects. What I'd really like to be able to do when we get to the end of this is have people say, I really wish it wasn't there, but I understand the process that you've used. And the final thing that I want to say then is, even if you think it's terrible when we make a decision or along the way, we still want to talk to you and hear from you. If you want to argue against the decision we make in the end, absolutely you're right to do that, but we'd really encourage you to work with us. In case an option you don't like comes to pass, then at least feel that you've made your best efforts to make it as good as possible as it can be. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you. Wonderful. Heaps of information there and lots of ways to find out more and stay involved. Before I invite the Mayor to speak to you, I just would like to see if you have any questions and check it with your neighbour. So if you have a question simmering away or you've written one down, ask your question with your neighbour or someone behind you or in front of you. Just check that it's a question, not a statement, but is it a question that's going to add value or give us all more information. So just 2 or 3 minutes checking your questions with your neighbours that you might have for Kim.
Just for this one. One of the chains.
I'll run. Okay. That's a good sign for the question and answer session that's coming up. Thank you. Just before I move on to the Mayor, a shout out to our Facebook people. There's about 300 live now, over 2,200 views and more than 135 comments. So thanks a lot for participating, Facebook world. And I've just stepped down here because some of you can't see me. There's so many people up on the stage, I thought I'd just break it up a bit by not being up on stage. So, sorry about that. I'd like to introduce the Mayor, who is going to share with you the Council's preferred option. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming out in sort of the numbers that you have and those that have made yourself available online. This turnout is certainly indicative of what is a very engaged community. We had overwhelming response to our Shire plan, whose title was Living in the Landscape, and that's certainly central to our theme. Tonight is not just about North East Link and the Council providing you our initial views, but it's also very much about listening to what you've got to say. Your concerns and your ideas will certainly shape Council's advocacy and commentary into the future. We have an enormous number of senior council officers here to listen. Our CEO, new CEO Mark Stormer is on stage, again here to listen. And indeed, this meeting has certainly been the first public meeting anywhere since these four options were brought before us. So indeed, my thank you to the staff for really what has been a pretty short 6-day turnaround to make this happen. Let me start by saying that the North East Link is vital. It must go ahead. Certainly our own surveys indicate that 80% of our residents see traffic and congestion as the biggest issue affecting our community. It is overwhelmingly the biggest issue on any survey which we undertake. It is indeed vital to address the traffic congestion we all deal with on a daily basis. And indeed, from day one, we took up the opportunity to talk to the federal government, who'd promised $15 million for this feasibility at the last federal election. And we asked them to get underway with that straight away, which they did, and they announced that within the first month of us being elected as new council. Following on from which the state government then decided to engage in the conversation and then allocated initially another $35 million. And so we had effectively $15 million. In short, I won't go through the whole process, but the state government's not ended up taking up the federal government's $15 million and allocated another $65 million to give themselves $100 million to take this project forward. It is good to see that we've certainly got their engagement. We must certainly look at the options to see what is the much needed road infrastructure whilst indeed protecting our green wedge from the environment. Importantly, we need to address the traffic issues which we do have on our doorstep. The North East Link, and understand the timeframes here, because what I'm trying to do is to give you, I guess, just some of the facts that sit over and above in terms of political context of what you've heard of the technical detail. The indications are a minimum of 8 years to 10 years before this project would be realised. So that's 8 to 10 years. If you're living on Rosanna Road, that clearly is going to be a nightmare given it's even at capacity, but at 4% growth per annum projected. In 10 years' time, I really don't know what's going to happen. So we must immediately start looking at the short to medium term congestion issues. We can't simply just go, North East Link's got a route, everything will go away. It needs a dramatic series of complementary projects to get the best outcome for our abutting municipalities, but most certainly for our own shire. The transport remedies themselves certainly are not enough just by way of its road networks. We must also reduce the number of cars on our roads, and to achieve that, the Council certainly are advocating for substantial rail upgrades, most notably the Hurstbridge Railway line. We're also seeking rail upgrades at the stations to encourage and support additional car parking and disability access, so at Diamond Creek Station and Eltham North Station, and also to see another station at what you could call either Diamond Creek South or Eltham North, depending upon which area you're coming from, with additional car parking and a reservation which already exists for that near Ellendale Road. We're also advocating better cycling and pedestrian access via Aqueduct Trail between Greensboro and Yarra Glen, the extension of the Diamond Creek Trail from Diamond Creek to Hurstbridge, which we're dealing with at Council tomorrow night, and bicycle cages at Diamond Creek, Wattle Glen and Hurstbridge railway stations. Indeed, these other projects would help remove people off our roads and make it safer for the broader community. In saying this, the road infrastructure projects can't simply be put on hold. We need these other complementary projects running at the one time. So don't be diverted by just focusing on this issue. Diamond Creek Road between Greensboro Road Bypass and Yanreen Road, as significant works can be undertaken. We need to have the Fitzsimmons Lane work done and commenced immediately. Some of you will be well aware of the work just about to commence on Bolton Street. We should be commencing in the last quarter of this year and hopefully finished by around about February, a project funded by the state government, at around about $10 or $11 million. There were two options at the last state election people may have forgotten about. One was certainly both building Bolton Street. By the Labor Party and the Coalition had a $22 million option building Bolton Street and a range of other $11 million complementary projects, signalling and other things at Fitzsimmons Lane, which is about fixing the problem. So it's not just North East Link. Aqueduct Road at Diamond Creek, in other words, supporting the Fitzsimmons Lane roundabout in Main Road. These projects will certainly improve the Shire in the medium term, so we need to encourage support, and we need your thought processes around what you see as key issues in the medium term throughout that 10-year program. We have just seen the 4 possible North East Link corridors, and we saw those at 7 a.m. last Monday morning for the first time. And I do thank Kim for the presentation and the work that they've provided tonight. And there'll be more technical details, as she's indicated, obviously tomorrow night, if those wish to come back further. Can I encourage you to look at the North East Link website, and there is a technical document of about 71 pages. Very important document which sets the detail, which I've had the opportunity, and some of you might already have had the opportunity to read through. And it's the combination of that technical information and the combination of the costs and the combination of the obvious need to get on with things that causes me now to make the next comments. Premier Daniel Andrews is on the record already at his press conference last Monday indicating that he's hoping that the project will come in at around about $10 billion. And that's the sort of anticipated numbers that he's got. Our calculations, and indeed supported by many others, are that to do these particular projects, Corridor A is about $8 billion, Corridor B at around about $17 billion, and Corridor C at about $19 billion, and Corridor D at $23 billion. These are huge numbers. So I don't think it's too hard to see, if the government's indicating that it wants to spend around about $10 billion, that to consider a detailed assessment of a project which, if you look at the technical data, provides little benefit in immediate transfer of car numbers and freight, that a project at option D is worth $23 billion is a big ask for any government to seek to fund. Equally, we see Corridor A and B being the best outcome in terms of the environmental values which are so important to our Green Wedge Shire. It does concern me and the Council, and I've already expressed this to Government, that the nature of, as I said at the start, they've got $100 million to do this particular feasibility. To continue to spend money when we have an immediate problem to fix some short-term issues, to spend this next $50 million on assessing options which clearly are not viable financially or environmentally, are frankly just never going to work, such as option C or B. In my view, a government, and frankly, as I said to officers and to the government, if the officers gave us this presentation in the detail that they've already provided to us, we would have said quite simply, option A and B are affordable and make sense. Option D, C and D are not affordable and do not make sense. Let's get going on option A and B. Let's get going on option A and B, and that $50 million approximately that we might save, we could look at doing some immediate traffic management to start to fix the problems now, not to wait until the next state election and then have a vote on it and then think about what's going to happen. 2.5 years before anything is really going to start. Certainly, I don't want to rule out hearing from you tonight. You might be able to see something in the technical data that I cannot. But certainly, we see the environment as very important to this. We are the Green Wedge. We are a shire that understands what the costs are. This is indeed tonight an opportunity to tell your council where you want us to take this particular direction. We have been forthright thus far, being out really in the media the following or the same day as this particular announcement, and having gone through the data and spent the full day on it. Council will be having a formal meeting on August the 29th. And that really will be setting our agenda going forward and making some further preliminary comments being formed out of the work that you will tell us over the next 2 weeks and indeed out of tonight. Depending upon what we hear tonight, I expect we will hold more community sessions along the way, and once we see the preferred route from government, may obviously be saying a fair bit more. We also encourage you to have your say directly to the North East Link Authority. Their submissions are closing next. Our submissions for our council meeting close next week, and these other very formal sessions that the authority is setting, and I encourage you to attend those. But at the end of the day, this is not council's project. We will advocate, and we'll advocate very fiercely on your behalf. This is a state government project. So I urge you to make it very clear, your opinion, to your local members. members of Parliament. In our particular case, those that are in government, Vicky Ward and Daniel Green, and we have a sheet of all of the members of Parliament of all political persuasions, which we've made it easy for you to be able to email and make your comments very clear. Also to those on Facebook, can I thank you for your consideration, and whilst if you will email me tomorrow, I may not get back to you on the same day as I try to do, but nonetheless we will take into account really your decisions and your views as to how we move forward. Can I say no stone will be left unturned on this, and we will do whatever it takes to get the best outcome for our Shire. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, so far we're respecting the time. This is great. This is your opportunity now to ask questions, and hopefully you had a little practice before with your neighbour. And to answer your questions, we have the CEO of Nullumbik Shire, Mark Stormer, Kim Jordan, who you've heard from North East Link Authority, her colleague Bruno, with a surname I don't know, sorry, and Mayor Peter Clark to answer your questions. There might be a couple of other people here in the room from Council who might be able to help as well. So we have Lisa and Alison. Can you put your hands up there? So Lisa and Alison from Nullumbik Shire have microphones, and we can just do this the normal way. Put up your hands and I'll try and keep it as fair as possible. We have one here. I also should highlight that the spillover room are sending questions via carrier pigeon called Emily. So we have 3 sources of questions. We've got Facebook questions, you here in the room, and the spillover room. So I'll have to try and juggle those 3. So I saw a hand go up here. So Lisa or Alison, can you hot-foot it down? Did you put on your runners? Yep, let's do one.
The first question from next door.
Okay. What are the timeframes to plan and build of each option? Oof. What are the timeframes to plan and build of each option? That might be for Bruno. Thanks.
Does this work? Yeah. From the diagrams that Kim showed you, the lengths are quite different. At the shortest end is about 8 kilometre link. At the longest end, it's about 40 kilometres. So the construction durations would be vastly different, particularly when you consider the length of tunnelling involved. We are assuming that for looking forward, we're assuming that it'll take a good 2 years to obtain the planning approvals and at the same time run a procurement process which might overlap by a further year. So that takes 3 years from now, and the construction period a minimum of 4 to 5 years. So we're getting up towards 8 years plus that the Mayor referred to earlier.
Can people get that information from the technical summary? Some of that information? Not yet.
That detail is not in the report at the moment, but I think the government has been very clear in the media as well that it'll take a number of years, best part of a decade.
Okay, thank you. So the first question was over here. Then I've got one right down the back with the green paper, I think. Then one here. Yep.
Hi, yeah, this is just a question about option B. There's a number of interchanges planned for option B. Is there one planned for the end of Fitzsimmons Lane?
Not at this stage. The map didn't indicate a location, mainly because it's early days yet. I think the theme over the last week or two since we've been consulting with the broader community, we've been very clear on the message that it's still early days and there's a lot of work still to be done. Whether Fitzsimmons Lane would have an interchange is something that there is no position at the moment, but that further work might take it one way or the other if that option is selected.
So it's not on the cards at all?
No.
Okay.
Not at this stage, no.
Okay.
Okay, and then a question over here, the lady in the pink scarf. I'm going to have to use your clothing to help me there, okay?
How does each option provide escape routes in the event of fire?
maybe I'll deal with that. Rural and urban freeways, particularly where they traverse areas prone to bushfires, are designed for emergency access and egress. A number of you who would have used Hume Freeway, for example, there are underpasses across the freeway to allow communities to escape from one side of the freeway to the other. If it really, the response really would involve consideration which corridor is selected. Corridor D, clearly, it's sort of in an area where it could be deemed to be higher risk of bushfires. Possibly C, possibly B. Corridor A is very different terrain, it's very much urbanised, so each of the route options would have to have its own response.
If I can
Yes.
just add a bit to the end of that, sorry. As I said to you earlier, there has been some discussion about that from the outset. We've talked to the MFB and our CEO's talked to Craig Lapsley as well, so it's a good time, I guess, that it becomes top of mind for areas out here. The two things that come out of it is that the freeway can in fact provide better access for emergency services and better escape routes for local people. One of the things as well, though, is that people have said, well, there'll be vastly more cars coming through. We've also had people talking about cigarette butts coming out of the cars, and I guess on that response I just want to say it is a freeway, and I don't want to in any way minimise what the risk is, but it's not like driving down Kangaroo Ground Road or Jumping Creek Road where flicking a cigarette means that you get into bushland. It's not going to be that same sort of setting, but again, those are the things that we really need to hear from you, is where is it exactly that you're worried about, and what are the opportunities you think there could be for using that access in a better way if one of the options through those bushfire areas was chosen.
Thank you, Kim. We have a question up the back, and then there's a lady with glasses here who had one. Then I've got some Facebook, and then the man in the black jacket at the back there. So then I'll keep up with the others after. Yep.
I understand the options, specifically options C and D, from Diamond Creek perspective, following the proposed road to Ryan's Road, then across the actual Diamond Creek itself. There's no provision there for a tunnel in the pre-planning. Would that be something in the future, knowing that's a sensitive wetland, etc., in that area, platypuses in the Diamond Creek, etc., etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, you're the second person who's mentioned platypuses just today, or platypi just today. As we said, the areas that are shown for tunnel at the moment are the minimum ones. That's been done with the desktop studies and the areas of environment and mental sensitivity that we know, but it's you who know where there are powerful owls and platypuses and orchids and what other things, and that's really the information we need from you to work further on what it would be like in the end if one of those routes was chosen.
This question's got two parts. Firstly, I noticed that the very first picture you put up tonight had a 3-lane each way. So is that what it's going to be? Is it going to be a 6-lane freeway? And will you be acquiring extra land for future expansion of that?
I'll give that to Bruno because he's the engineer in the house. So.
Yes, it will be 3 lanes each way. Tunnels will be 3 lanes each way, consistent with other Melbourne tunnels. It is likely that outside of tunnels there would be additional land required to preserve for some additional infrastructure if that's required. But at that point, tunnels would probably control the capacity.
What is the width of a 6-laner generally?
It'll be 3 lanes in each way, so in total there'll be 6 lanes.
Yeah, but meterage or how? What's?
The actual dimension.
Yeah.
Well, each lane of freeway is typically 3.5 metres, plus the shoulder distances and so forth. So 30 or 40 metres would be probably a good starting point. But that's not necessarily applicable to every location. Topography dictates what other measures and what other space you need.
Hi, I live in North Warrandyte, and I have been doing some jobs in Echuca, which meant I've had to leave North Warrandyte at 6 a.m. So driving north from Warrandyte, already at 6 a.m. on Kangaroo Ground Road, we've had, on some mornings, like 2 kilometres up from the bridge traffic. And then as I drive out through Hurstbridge and Whittlesea, Mernda, to see all of those people living there, and more will be living there, are there plans, I know this is a little bit off, it's off, but it's actually on, you know, the subject. What's happening with all of those people who are pouring in through Eltham and Warrandyte now? Are there plans for roads for them?
There are a number of answers. To just start off, the government has approved the upgrade of Yen Yin Road, and some of the people in the room would probably be aware of that. That'll provide some or a better access for the trip that you are making, but it won't solve all the problems. The Whittlesea area going all the way into Epping and beyond has another freeway reservation that was set up perhaps barely 10 years ago. It's part of the Outer Metropolitan Ring Road / E6. You can probably find it on the Melways, that's the easiest to find. So clearly planners in the past have thought that Melbourne's growth in that area, and that is a very busy growth area of Melbourne, that some additional road space will be required. That together with upgrades to train, train services and extension of the railway lines into that corridor as well is helping people to move around the city. But yeah, ongoing challenge.
So just from Facebook, and we've got about 300 people joining us now, and a few of them are on the Eastern Freeway. James has written, how do you plan to fix the mess at the city end of the freeway?
Thank you, James. Look, I'll direct you to a document that's been prepared by Infrastructure Victoria, a body that was set up 2 or 3 years ago to advise the state government about infrastructure priorities. And when I say infrastructure, I don't mean just roads and transport, but social infrastructure, schools, hospitals, water supply, etc., etc. That document identifies East-West Link, as it was known a few years ago, as a priority project, but not in the next 10 or 15 years. So it's a project that obviously that body has recognised that will be required sometimes, but it's not a priority at the moment.
Thank you. And the gentleman here, there, and then we'll go there, then I'll come back to this lady, then I'll go to the back. Okay, thank you.
Option B appears to have no road reservations, is the most expensive of any of the options that could be built and satisfies the least of the North East Link long-term objectives. It also appears that it would turn Main Road in Lower Plenty into an awful traffic snow. Why was this considered, and how soon will it be eliminated from the options?
I assume that's option D. B. So option B is the one that follows the power line corridor. Well, look, tonight we presented you with 4 corridors. We've actually had multiple other corridors that we assessed in the lead up to releasing those 4. Those 4 kind of cover the envelope from east to west. And they all reasonable assumptions, but they all have different benefits and different challenges. The work that we are doing at the moment in the lead up to advising the government later this year and the engagement with the communities and other stakeholders is going to inform which option will be presented to the government for consideration as the preferred one. So your question was when. Later this year there will be a decision which option would be the preferred one, and by default it will eliminate the other ones. I hope I've answered that question.
Thank you, Bruno. Over in the gentleman over there, then I'll come back to this lady in front, then I'll go to the back with Alison's got someone, then I have two more in the middle, then I'll go to the back again. Okay.
Okay, well, we heard the recommendation from the Shire where you think we should go, and I appreciate that. Have there been any consultations with other affected shires? Are they in alignment with your recommendations?
It's fair to say, at the moment we've had a conversation with the City of Banyule. Clearly, City of Banyule understands a lot of the roads look at them pretty seriously. They equally understand they need a city link, is the first thing to be said, because of Rosanna Road, etc. And I think my read is that they see option A as an option which is relatively obvious, to say the least. Their greatest concern in the conversation I've had at the moment with them is about, and they're sort of encouraging me to talk about option A in terms of more tunnelling, as the direction they've been going, to be able to get more tunnelling back into Greensborough Road, more underground. Outside of that, they well understand option D is off with the Pixies, and option C has some validity, but you know, at those sort of costs, I mean, everybody's understanding the reality. So they well understand where it's up to, and they're basically, I think, frankly, arguing the best case they can for their community, but understanding we need to get on with it. They equally have got the same concerns as I expressed earlier on. What happens for the next 10 years? And I don't think I can re-emphasise that enough. We can't all sit here for a decade and go, oh, something might happen, without all those other things occurring. You know, we touched on East-West Link a moment ago. You just can't keep putting them all off into the never-never and frankly, wasting money in other areas. It's pretty obvious.
Thank you. We have one in front, then I've got one at the back, and there's three people in the middle who've been waiting very patiently. I will get to you. So this lady here. Thank you.
Just regarding Corridor C, I live in Eltham North, very close to the intersection of Ryan's Road and Wattle Tree, which is considered the St Helena College Zone. I'm very concerned about the possible interchange up there that might prevent people in those roads where a lot of the residents have purchased homes so their children can go to St Helena and all the primary schools, get up to the supermarket, that people living in that area may be completely cut off due to the installation of an interchange there. I'm just wondering how you propose to handle that sort of situation.
Infrastructure like North East Link presents a lot of challenges. And I mean that, it's not a slogan, but I mean it genuinely. I have been involved with lots of large projects around Melbourne over the last 2 or 3 decades. And in urbanised areas, that challenge is multiplied. Engaging with people like yourselves tonight and continuing dialogue is going to be important. If that option is selected, how we actually design it to make it as less impactful on your daily lives and your neighbours and the people that live in that area, that's going to be important. So the engagement is not going to stop tonight, and it's not going to stop when the preferred option is selected. In fact, the hard work will begin from there on to actually detail out that option, how that's going to work, and precisely where the boundaries are, and how access is going to be provided to people to use the existing network as they do at present, and how they would be able to use the new link when it's built.
I'll just add a bit onto that as well. So in terms of the studies that we absolutely know that we'd have to do a social impact assessment is one of those. So the studies that are required by the Minister for Planning when we do the environment effects statement are quite clearly laid out, and it's something that we've got plenty of time to discuss as time goes on. But the scoping directions that are issued by the Minister are put out to the public for you to have input to say, we want to make sure that you consider all of these sorts of things. The social impact assessment, as I say, is a major part of it. There's studies that we're doing as well which are human health impacts. So that also includes very particularly sensitive groups and vulnerable groups into which children and also elderly people come, of course, but also into those groups are other vulnerable groups, so people who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, people with disabilities and illnesses and so forth. So one of the things which again is really important about working with local government is local government are the people who know that in the areas. So until we talk to the local government and we talk to people like you, we don't necessarily know where those pockets are. We need to talk to the Victorian School Building Authority about where planned schools are, not just where the schools are now, and understand those things. So it's as Bruno says, the engagement is a big part of it, but we are also at law required to look after those types of groups of people.
So I guess that's an example, Kim and Bruno, the sort of question that you want to hear when you ask, what are you interested in? Okay, fantastic, thanks. Now there's one at the back, two people waiting patiently in the middle and a lady in a red top, but I also have questions from the other room and I've noted that, but we're getting close to closing time. So the one at the back, Alison, yep.
Hello, Kim or Bruno. The location of interchanges is obviously extremely important in the impact that the road has on the communities. And Bruno, you said that the interchanges aren't necessarily where they are, would be where they are on the map. On the Corridor C on the map on the internet, there is dotted line for tunnel from just past Ryan's Road across to near Springvale Road. But in the middle, right near Main Road, there's a solid section. Does that mean that the road will be coming to the surface near Main Road, Eltham? And would that perhaps mean that there would then be a possibility of an interchange at Main Road, Eltham?
The interchanges that you see on the maps at the moment are the ones that were modelled for the results that you found there. And again, the sections that don't show tunnel are just, the tunnel is the minimum section there. Those, again, are exactly the questions that we need to hear from people is what does it mean? We want to know more about the modelling that you've done here or there. We want to understand where things would be. The interchange as well, I guess, are the roads that the North East Link needs to connect to. They're not necessarily in exactly the spots where those need to happen. Did you want to add anything?
Thank you, Kim. Hot stop presses. I've just been asked how would you feel if we went for an extra 15 minutes? All right, overwhelming yes, I think. And don't hesitate if you need to leave, just feel free to go, but that takes a little bit of pressure off getting your questions in. So I now have a question from the other room, Emily, and then I'm going to the lady in red there, and then the gentleman here. Okay, yep.
Cool. The other room asked, our Mayor Peter mentioned other projects that would go along with the larger project, like reducing local traffic here. In the short term, what is Council going to do to mitigate the traffic gridlock risk in a big bushfire event in Eltham?
Yep. Look, there's no doubt bushfire is an overwhelming concern for us all. The first and main component of us to do our very best to ensure that we're as well prepared to ensure that we don't have a bushfire. We can't create roads or do anything else magically overnight, but this council has certainly allocated already in this year's budget more money to clean up roadsides and to be prepared. Holding its regular meetings with CFA, we've already made a range of policy adjustments to support CFA, who indicated that some of the things that they wanted weren't being done. And I can report that CFA recent meetings have indicated that the relationship and the opportunities to do burnings and other things are now in place. And indeed, I've got another meeting with them in about 4 weeks' time. So we are doing whatever we can to be prepared as best as we possibly can be prepared. In fact, my question of all of the CFA fire captains, really within the first month of being elected as mayor, was to say to them as we just started the fire season, if we do have another Black Saturday and we have to have a Royal Commission or something after that, I want to be able to say that we did everything we possibly could do to preparing for a fire season. So I want to know what else is on the list that we haven't done that we must do. And so we have worked through that list, and we will continue to have those conversations to be as prepared as we possibly can. Suffice to say, we are very keen to garner the broadest community support we can to get more roadworks and projects underway to be able to provide egress. There's certainly the bridge works that are in Warrandyte, which Vic Roads are about to undertake. We're working very quickly through any issues and have said to Vic Roads we want that work finished pre-Christmas. No delays from Nillumbik's end. We want to make sure everything can happen as smoothly as it can. So outside of government's building more substantial road networks and doing more traffic management of the roads that they control, recognising we don't control as a Shire the major arterial road network, that is controlled by Vic Roads, we continue that conversation.
Anything to add to that, Bruno? No? Thank you. There is someone in the middle here. Yes, Narelle, I think... No, it's a lady with a necklace. That's right. Good, yep.
That's me, great,
yes,
thank you.
Terrific, thank
you, Kim, for speaking tonight. My name is Natalie, I'm a resident of Eltham North, and I'm very concerned about the Corridor C, particularly because I live close to proposed interchange. My kids go to school at Eltham North Primary School, which is on Wattle Tree Road, and Ryans Road, Wattle Tree Road, I'm anticipating that Wattle Tree Road would require an upgrade to cater with the, for the traffic that you would imagine that would use that interchange. At the moment, walking to school, riding bike to school, it's all precarious with the traffic that's there at the moment. It's very congested. I'm wanting to know what sort of amendments would be made to Wattle Tree Road. Would that become a 2-lane road either side to cater for the traffic for that interchange? Because it's not safe as it is as a one single lane both ways. Even just coming to this meeting tonight, I slowed down to 30 kilometres at Eltham North Primary School because there was a huge big freight, refrigerated truck that was coming the other way, and it just wasn't safe. So yeah, my concern is safety with that interchange for my kids walking to school and driving to school, and for the kids of the future. So yeah, it's how wide does that road become with the upgrade plans for the interchange at the top of Ryans Road?
I don't have a specific answer, but I can articulate what the most likely scenario is. If that option gets selected and the interchange is placed, it will require some complementary works beyond the interchange itself to make it work. I can give you some examples for Eastlink, for example. Some people might not recall this, but if you cast your memory back 10 or 20 years, a lot of the roads that cross Eastlink, east-west, were arterial roads with 2 lanes, one lane each way, and they got duplicated and triplicated along the entire length of the Eastlink corridor because it had to be done to make Eastlink work as well as provide the local connectivities. It's quite common with big projects to do that, and I think North East Link you will see that there will be a range of responses to actually make the whole network function, and they'll be delivered as part of the complementary works supporting the main project. And details that you were explaining would require even a more detailed response by having a dialogue with the school community to see how we can actually make that work even better for parents to be able to send kids to school.
No, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think as well as that, and also referring to Eastlink, but on any of the other major projects as well, that shared use paths, pedestrian paths and cycling paths, and that sort of connectivity becomes an important opportunity, and that's another thing, working with local governments, and as Bruno says, working with the school communities. So often we'll find things like the parking arrangements at school or the turnaround for people doing drop-ups and things become an opportunity, which is a huge thing for a council to do, but a small thing when you roll it up into the complementary works that a major project does. And again, when you look at the guiding principles that we have, the way it sits at the moment says minimising impacts to communities. But again, what we'd really like to hear from you is, well, don't just minimise, let's give us improvements. So here's some opportunities for, as I say, what look like minor works in a major project that can be really major things for smaller communities.
Oh, have you got a second question? Oh, you haven't asked a question. I'm so sorry. Thanks for keeping me on my toes. Please, after you.
It must be very difficult to balance environmental issues with infrastructure that we need, clearly. So in that context, I'm asking this question. On Corridor B, the changeover at Main Road, if you follow the power line, runs right through the Heidelberg Golf Club. Now, it must be an issue of carbon offsets with in an area like that. On top of that, the building itself has got some historical value, being opened by the Prime Minister of the day, Mr Bruce, back in 1929. So how do you offset, or how do you make judgments when you're talking about going through an area like that, please?
Lots of complex issues to resolve, and I think one of the slides that Kim put up earlier during her presentation talked about the environment effect statement and about 18 or 19 different disciplines that would have to be assessed for the chosen corridor in order to get the statutory approvals for the project. So historical heritage is one, the environmental significance is another. Kim said that in earnest we're going to start spring surveys across the corridors to better understand the ecological values by each location and each corridor. So at the moment we're not there yet. I'm not going to pretend that I have all the answers, but if we were sitting here this time next year, we would have a lot of answers.
Yeah, we just head back to Facebook now, where we thank everyone who has joined us. We've had over 4,000 people join us over the last hour and a half and about 400 comments. Ty has asked, can you talk about proposed tunnelling under environmentally sensitive areas, and what are the visual and environmental impacts like vents on these areas above ground?
Thank you.
Tunnelling is ideal under environmentally sensitive areas. If you had a choice of building infrastructure such as North East Link through those areas, you'd want to put it underground. And if it is underground, then you need to design the tunnel to make sure it doesn't cause any unintended consequences to the very thing that you're trying to save and protect. And engineering is quite sophisticated these days. It can be achieved. Tunnels are quite common around the world. There are tens of thousands of tunnels around the world, and many of them are built in environmentally sensitive areas or in urban areas like Melbourne to protect the urban amenity. The second part of the question is the tunnel ventilation. Tunnel ventilation is generally, as a principle, occurs at each exit point of the tunnel. So we've got examples of that locally with CityLink and with EastLink. Similarly, the Westgate Tunnel project, which is currently going through an EES inquiry panel. Yesterday was day one, so if you're interested how that's progressing, get on the Westgate Tunnel project website, because you might learn something that will actually apply to the North East Link in about 12-15 months' time. The tunnel ventilation itself has to be designed to EPA requirements, so they are not just state standards, but they are national standards. And the quality of the air that's discharged into the atmosphere has to be done in a way that it's not detrimental to human health.
Okay, thank you. I have one question from the other room first. Then I've got a gentleman who's been waiting patiently in a grey sweatshirt there. Narelle, your question's been answered. Excellent, that's great. So one from the other room, grey sweatshirt, Alison, young woman in green, young man standing in the column, and then back to the back again. Okay. Oh, over there too. Good. I need someone with a microphone to stand near people as well to help. Yeah, from the other room. Yep.
Jane from next door asked, and it's a great follow-on from the last question, what guarantee is there that the tunnels will not be abandoned for the cheaper option of surface only?
Well, I think we need to have a look at the track record of major infrastructure in Melbourne. CityLink were built in late 90s, and they were built in tunnel to protect the very gardens we love in central Melbourne, and to protect the amenity of the inner Melbourne area, protect the river. Eastlink tunnels were built to protect the Mullumbimby Valley, which has very high environmental significance. I can tell you about the Westgate Tunnel as well, because I worked on that for a little while. And that's going to have a tunnel under Yarraville and Seddon and Kingswell to protect the urban amenity of the people that lived in that part of Melbourne. So we have been consistent, and I'm not quite sure whether it must have been the Facebook answer, or a question, was it? We have indicated and been consistent on the message that the tunnel lengths we have shown in our slides and the material that we have been used for consulting with the communities and stakeholders is their minimum lengths we expect. So we haven't actually been very precise. Those tunnels could be longer. We don't expect them to be any shorter because our assumption was that we would want to tunnel under residential areas, and we would want to tunnel under environmentally sensitive areas. Yeah.
Just one thing to add to that as well is that we're not coming out to you talking about things that we haven't discussed with government. So when we come out and say these are minimum tunnel lengths, these are the commitments that the government has made in the information that we've brought to you. So whilst I don't know if we've said, but if we hadn't, we should have, no one who's working at North East Link is making decisions, but we're equally not providing information that hasn't been endorsed by the government at this stage. So it's not a situation where we'll make a recommendation and bring it to you and the government will say, oh, well, actually, thanks, but we don't like that idea. It's going as is responsible for a government through the members of Parliament and through that government decision-making before it comes to you.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Now we have, I think the young lady, sorry, shouldn't be ageist, bright green top. Then we'll go to the back where Alison's got a few people who've been waiting patiently, including the young man to your right, Alison. And then we've got, there was someone down here with the glasses on and a green top. I thought you were interested in a question. No, there's one here. Okay, good. So, at the back. Oh, no, green, sorry, green, yep, sorry.
Okay. Hi, my name's Siobhan. I've lived in Nillumbik my whole life. I'm only 22 and I'd like to grow old in the Green Wedge. That's why my family moved here. My main question is, of the 4 options, will any of them be proposed as toll roads?
Any of them would be toll roads. The government made it clear from the outset that the North East Link will be a tolled road.
Okay, Alison, you have a few people there, and then Lisa has someone up the front. So, Alison, you've got 2, I think. Yep. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Rob. Just in relation to some of your previous slides, you talked about the business case still being in progress, and you also mentioned some key criteria for consideration within that business case. However, I'd like to understand how you plan to evaluate those criteria, perhaps the weighting applied to those criteria, and will those key decisions be made in a fair and transparent manner so we can all see how they're spread across the board, so to speak?
I think the short answer is yes, and the long answer is it's more complicated than that. But as I said, as I went through, the objectives and the principles are what sits as the decision-making process. There are evaluation criteria that sit below that, and the evaluation criteria will be made public, yes. So the evaluation criteria go at a variety of levels, so down to a granular level, so you don't reach a point where you say, gee, they all look the same as each other. We need to be able to go the next step and the next step. So the way the evaluation process is set out in the newsletter and the information that's out at the moment is with an understanding of, and I guess a respect for people who don't actually want to spend a week reading documents. So it's to say, here's the high level, but of course there's more information that sits below that. So at this stage, it's the preliminary work. What we're really saying to you is, if you're our board of directors, tell us that we're heading in the right direction, or tell us if we're not, and then we'll proceed with the work. One of the things that I didn't say is that the results of all of the consultation that we're doing at the moment, the community consultation, will be brought up into a report, and that report will be made public by the end of September, that says, here's what we've heard from people about the information that we put forward, here's what we've done with it. So we are hearing some things that are not relevant to this project. We'll still tell you we heard that, but we can't do those things, but this was what we've done with that information. We'll be saying to you, as a result of what you've told us, here is what we've done, or here's some things that we can't do. So, for example, sometimes people ask for things that actually at law we can't do in terms of how to design a road, in which case we'll say we weren't able to change this because of that. Those minute detail of the evaluation criteria aren't available at the moment, but they certainly will be available before the business case comes out.
Thank you. Now we have another one at the back, and another one at the back, and one more here, and that might be all we have time for. We have 3 more questions, but fear not, there'll be other opportunities. So 2 at the back, please. Yep.
Just a clarification, if I can ask, regarding areas marked as potential minimum tunnel length, if part of the final route, would these areas near certainly be tunnelled, or have I misunderstood the meaning?
You've understood it perfectly right.
That was a lovely quick question. Okay, yes?
Hello, Mark's my name. I'm a long-time resident of Eltham. We've raised our family here, and hopefully we'll continue here well into our retirement years. It's a great area. I'm just interested, Peter, as our Lord Mayor, unless I misunderstood you, you indicated the council's preference was an A and B option. I would have thought, did I get you right there? Was that, you said A and B, you didn't come down one or the other, definitely?
What I said was that at the initial briefing that we had, that I would have discounted C and D, and you would have done some more work on A and B. Having said that, A is obviously a preferred route and makes the most sense, but I can well understand, in fairness to the authority, why they might want to look at some further alternatives, because if you look at that technical data and you look at the numbers of cars that are achieved to be able to, and freight to be able to take off the other roads, both make some sense, but clearly A is outstanding, both in terms of virtually half the cost, etc.
Yep. Time-wise as well. Thank you.
No more question over there. There was one down the end. There was a gentleman with a booklet thing, and this will have to be the last question, but I'll reassure you about how we're collecting your questions after this. Thank you.
With respect to option C and D, you referred to the fact that with Ryan's Road, if we had to do an intersection there, you would link off from there if needed. You're also saying that you would then tunnel underneath Diamond Creek. The issue is that to come off the top of the existing ring road and get down under the Diamond Creek, you're not also going to be able to put an intersection at Diamond Creek at Ryan's Road. If you still want to keep the Ryan's Road intersection and the off-ramp and then go down under the Diamond Creek or into your tunnel on the other side of Diamond Creek, as you've showed on the map, you're going to have to put about a 20 or 30 metre high bridge right the way across from the other side of Ryan's Road. If you're going to cross over the creek, stay above the existing floodplain and also go over the top of the railway line. Whereabouts would you put the tunnel under if you're going to go under Diamond Creek in order to allow for trucks to not have an extremely steep ingress and egress?
I agree with you. I think I've said it a couple of times, is that selecting a preferred corridor will allow us to go into more detailed development. And we're certainly, one of the key challenges on this project is the undulating nature of the terrain, compounded by residential areas and compounded by high quality environmental values areas. and how you actually blend that and find the best balance would be a challenge once the preferred option is selected, to actually come up with the best option that would be able to achieve a whole range of betterments, if you like.
Okay, thank you.
But it's a challenge. I'm not shying away from that. It is a real challenge. At Ryan's Road, if that option was selected, we might be only able to provide ramps facing one way, not both ways. So you could actually split the interchange, one to Diamond Creek Road and one to Ryan's Road. And that way we might be able to have a better technical solution.
Kim, did you want to add to that? Yep.
I just wanted to add one little bit, because I appreciate that Peter and a couple of other people saying stop spending the money on the planning study now and let's spend it on something more tangible, and that resonates with me as well. I'm very much a let's get on with it person. However, what you're saying actually identifies why we need to be doing work on more options, because at the moment we've done preliminary work. We don't want to find a fatal flaw because we've gone with an alignment on a kind of gut feel, and then all of a sudden we've got to go back and start again. So it's kind of like we need to be looking at precisely those complexities that you're saying on more than one option, to make sure that actually we are doing something in 10 to 20 years and not 20 to 50 years. So
thank you. Clearly there's lots more questions, and I'm hoping that this just whets your appetite to go along to the North East Link engagement sessions that Kim had up on the slide before, which are in the handouts that are on everyone's seats. There's more available outside. You all have bits of paper and wrote down questions, all the questions from the other room, from Facebook, any questions that you've written down that you don't feel have been answered tonight. They'll be collected at the registration desk, or you can leave them on your chair and the council staff will collect those. So your questions will be collated. But as I said at the beginning, this is just one of many conversations coming up. But I'd like to thank our panellists for responding to your questions. And I'd like to get a sense in the room, just so you leave on a little bit of what am I going to do next. If 10 is down here, and 10 means I know everything I need to know about North East Link and all the options. I'm pretty confident I have all the information I need. I know lots about it. If all the way down here is number 1, and this is the first I've heard about it. This is so 1 to 10 in terms of how much information do you feel you have. I'd like to hear your applause when I walk up and down the spectrum. So 10, let's get a sense of, I know everything I need to know about North East Link. I feel like I've got lots of information. Okay. That's good, that's good. That bodes well for the upcoming engagement sessions. So 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we're about 2, 3, 4 was my scientific reading of that. So thank you so much for all your time, and I'd like to leave you with one more question. What are you going to do next? Where are you going to go and get more information? And please share what interests you with North East Link. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in trouble. I'm not very good at housekeeping. There was a warning or a request from the venue operators about there's a lot of cars in the car park. We've talked about transport all night. Please be very careful, more than usual, when you're exiting the car park, because there's a lot of cars. Any other detail? It'll take a little while. Okay, thank you so much and good night. Drive safe.